Well, hey folks, it's your old pal, King Waspinator. Welcome back to Total Party Skills. Be sure to hit like and subscribe. This video is going to be a bit of a viewer request. Had a comment yesterday asking about me to espouse a bit more on something I kind of have touched upon in a couple of videos, and that's what the actual real core default setting of 5th edition D&D actually is. Now, if you were to look at the bulk of the adventure modules that they have put out, and also, setting source material, what little we've gotten, you would think, as they claim, that Forgotten Realms is your default setting. However, in their cosmology, and also the fact that they really don't have much to players to do past 10th level, that's obvious. If you notice, they don't really design their modules very far above 10th level. I mean, what we got, like Rise of Tiamat and anything else? Arguably Curse of Strahd. Seriously, if there's a module I'm not thinking of that was for characters of level 12 and above, I'd like to hear of it if I haven't already mentioned it, because almost all their stuff is designed for level 1 through 10 when it's on the Forgotten Realms. And basically, even the Ghosts of the Sargassum, Shipwreck Cove, D&D Curse of the Elf of the Quagmire, whatever that one was. Their lone little tepid, dipping just their edge of their pinky toe into the pool of Greyhawk, that book. That one's not really designed for high-level characters, but the game's designed for people to go all the way up to level 20, so what exactly are you supposed to be doing? What's the real story behind all this? Well, that would be Planescape. The entire cosmology of 5th edition D&D is based on Planescape. They did remove the Outlands, but otherwise the Disc of the Outer Planes is preserved. Sigil is still there. They've added the Shadowfell and the Feywild. Those weren't really around to my knowledge back at the time that this was a brand new product and hot on the shelves. The inner planes function the same. You have tieflings, Gith are around as player characters. It's the Planescape setting, and really the only thing to do once player characters reach 10th level is level 1 to 5 they're local heroes. Levels 5 to 10 they become known world heroes, heroes to all the land. Where do you go from that? Well, I mean, unless you're trying to retrofit Mystara and characters that move on to global politics and global conquest, the only other real natural adventure path leads you on up into adventuring in the planes. Characters by that point have enough magic of their own, or access to magical abilities, or have befriended or made alliances with powerful enough entities that travel into the planes. Should be more than feasible for them. And compared to a lot of other AD&D books that you can dig out that are directly useful to you if you're trying to just run 5th edition as 5th edition, most of the Planescape box sets that you can get as printable large books on Drive-Thru RPG. As of the last time I had looked at them, still there. I mean, it's not like I go and double check after I buy the things, but all the information in these is super helpful. There's a few things that I guess you could view as out of date about them. Like I said, for some reason the Outlands is now gone, but in the same way that the Forgotten Realms setting has had its timeline advanced, during 3rd, 4th, and 5th edition to kind of explain in setting why there's been subtle changes to how things are working, and the addition of new races like Dragonborn and a lot of that kind of stuff. You can do something similar with Planescape, where the easy thing to do, since the Blood War is still a thing that is ongoing in the setting in 5th edition, obviously that didn't kind of end with any kind of resolution, but perhaps the Great March of the Modrons had come to completion, and that caused some sort of reset or lurch or something about that caused the plane of true neutrality, which was what the Disc of the Outlands was, to vanish. Sigil is just now an inverted city on the inside of empty space, kind of a thing. Um, for some reason, the Phlogiston has been destroyed. I don't know if that was something that they did in a prior edition or not, because there was that period of time where I was just kind of like away from gaming. But you know, in fifth edition, they do make a point of like make the substance, the aether between the stars, the crystal spheres of the star systems from Spelljammer. That was like the way that you could use a ship to like physically travel from one world to another within the material sphere without having to use interplanar travel to like jump through gates to reach alternate worlds. Um, for some reason, they've like made a point of like no, that's been burned away and you can't do that anymore. Like they've purposely disabled spelljammers, but yet there's still the implication that did exist, and therefore all the various worlds of the material plane are you know, still like exist in the same universe. They are different star systems. There's just no medium to get between one to the other that doesn't involve interdimensional hijinks. Uh, so Forgotten Realms really is just the default material plane setting to start at, and then as you get higher up in level, that's when you start getting into like the more loftier adventures, because like, you know, all the stuff that's challenging at high level is like either you're fighting like, you know, Godzilla level dragons and Tarrasques and all that kind of stuff, you know, if they stay on their home world, or you know, they be getting into like the you know, fighting devils and demons and angels alike across the upper spheres, and interfering in the plots of the gods, the you know, Clash of the Titans and Jason the Argonauts level kind of stuff, where stuff gets wonky. Um, Probably, you know, like all the books are really handy if you don't want to have to invest in like buying all the old box sets, because there's 4 in total. I mean, there's like the basic Planescape box set itself, which gives you just the overrun of Sigil, and what the Outlands are like, and just kind of the briefest description of like how the wheel of the Outer Planes works. Um, if you don't want to have to get that, and then the specific box sets for the Chaos Planes, the Neutrality Planes, and the Law Planes, the 2 simplest books to pick up that are probably the most relevant and useful still to a AD or a 5th edition D&D campaign would be the Guide to Sigil in the Cage, which you can get in print, and the Planewalker's Handbook. I mean, translating some of the specific data to, you know, player characters, you would either require a little, you know, retro engineering. If you do get the plain box set version, a lot of the various factions still function well. You know, there are various advantages and disadvantages that they give to, you know, people who sign up to be members of these esoteric factions. Most of them translate fairly simply and straightforwardly to 5th edition characters. It will take a bit more work if you want to, you know, resurrect Barriar. You'll want to dig up one of the Elemental Evil books, either Princess of the Apocalypse, or get that little you know, player's handbook for Elemental Evil that they put out there back in the early good days of D&D 5e. So you can have stats and rules for Genasi, because they also, you know, function as like more natural occupants of a Planescape setting. I remember there's like over the years I hear a lot of people who do complain about Planescape, saying that it's like too unplayable at early levels. I feel like that's entirely on the DM and what kind of adventures you're setting up, and what kind of limits you're putting on the players. I do feel it's kind of maybe a mistake to allow complete full access to all the factions. Maybe all the player characters should be focused through a common faction, and that way that kind of gives you a starting point in the Sigil setting. Arguably I wouldn't even necessarily start it off as a Sigil game. I do feel like there is some like logic to having the lower levels of play start off on one of the real worlds, and then like some Jim Henson movie, like you become like enlightened and awakened to just like how big the universe really is and how strange things are and what kind of opportunities are out there. And you know, as characters retire or get killed off, you can bring in the more weirder exotic kind of stuff maybe. But you know, there are ways to run it for beginning level characters. One of the very few experiences I had running AD&D back when I was a teenager was running Playscape. And well, I mean, it's kind of designed to be more White Wolfy in that it's a political game, because of how the factions function. Like a lot of the monsters and like super powerful beings you're running into aren't supposed to be like, shit, whip out your swords and attack. These creatures, when they're on the mortal realm, might be like acting monstrous and just viewing mortal creatures as like nothings to like feast upon. But when they're in the outer planes, like they're used to petitioners. Petitioners kind of just being like ghosts in heaven, kind of a thing. Uh, so if they might not even realize that the person that looks like a mortal person in one of the outer realms is actually a living being and not one of the petitioners of that plane. And even if they do realize or are aware that they're not, dead yet, um, they're going to assume that that person's there because they're some sort of badass and that they're worthy of being there. Their default setting isn't going to be attack when they're in their own home dimension. They're going to feel more relaxed. Devils and Avernus are not there to terrorize people. You can torment a petitioner all you want. Maybe they deserve it since they went to hell in their afterlife, but it's not like it's going to kill them. They'll just keep coming back, reforming, all that kind of stuff. And so also I would do things like the time scales maybe don't work out in the planes either. So maybe less time has passed in the planes than has on, like, say, the World of Forgotten Realms as the editions of D&D have advanced the timeline. Or it could run the opposite way. Maybe even more time has passed, and that also could be like maybe the Outlands is gone, and that's like a sign of some sort of like nothing from the never-ending story, some sort of existential meaninglessness that's slowly eating away at the heart, of the outer realms of existence. Kind of a thing you could do with it, or you could just like take the information out of here and just plop the plane of true neutrality right back into the middle of the hub. It's kind of weird in some ways that like modern D&D has kind of dropped the concept of true neutrality out of the alignment system. It is kind of a weird position for like anyone to achieve, if it is even technically achievable. It implies equilibrium, and a state of equilibrium is not a living system. So it's kind of like one of the problems with like humanity and why we're always in conflict with each other. It's like, well, we're not really alive and thriving if we're not. If everything was stable and peaceful, that'd be kind of achieving a level of equilibrium that would kind of cause the entire system to die. That's just how biology functions. And on the macro scale, there's certain similarities if you believe in like fractal kind of scaling type shit. Anyway, and like I said, this Planescape is the real thing that hangs over all. Like Eberron leads into the same outer realms that Faerun leads to, that Kryn leads to. All this stuff coexists, and so the overall greater setting itself is the actual setting. Like which world you decide to have your player character start off at and get their feet under them before they start to like jump around into the outer realms or into the inner realms. Although visually speaking, they're a little bit harder to like really wrap your brain around how realistic it seems that you can be hanging out in a plane of pure fire and all that kind of stuff. Or what exactly does a universe that's all Earth mean? Whereas, like, maybe the middle zones of the inner planes are probably your more playable, inhabitable areas, and then you have like the free floating places like the City of Brass and all that kind of shit. But like the thing about Planescape is it's really more about the outer planes. But it's all still there. Like the mythology is all still there. The only thing that 5th edition is they're just leaving a few things out of it for some reason. Also, like they don't really mention quite the wealth of gods that occupy the outer realms that you find in here. In large part because for some reason they got it in their head that everything from the Kara Tour part of the Forgotten Realms setting is like terribly racist, and they dare not address it. So the modern depiction leaves out all these Eastern flavored gods and goddesses and whatnot, which is kind of sad, but whatever. Wouldn't want anyone to accuse D&D of being racist, now would we? If you don't want to start players off, if you want to run an actual Planescape game with 5th edition and actually start people off in Planescape, I almost wouldn't necessarily recommend Sigil or even having them start off as members of factions. If you want to, I hate to bring them up, but in a weird way, I kind of feel that both Ravnica and Mythic Odysseys of Theros or actually should have been Planescape products, but instead, they were like morphed onto Magic the Gathering properties, which I'm actually shocked it's taken them so long to do that kind of a thing, considering that, it's been, 20 years plus since Wizards of the Coast bottom. But, Mythic Odysseys of Theros is basically just the top level of Aboria from Planes of Chaos. And with, changing a few names of things, you can basically just turn it into a setting book to play adventures on the topmost Greek-themed level of this lovely little tome, the Planes of Chaos box set. Aboria and a lot of the Planes of Chaos are actually probably, your more safe places for player characters to start off out at that are, approachable and have things to do. The Planes of Law are maybe safer, arguably, because everyone kind of abides by what they're supposed to be doing, and so there's not a lot of, random action that can threaten, characters unless they're just actively doing stupid things. But there's also kind of less to do there because of that. So the Planes of Chaos kind of give you a nice middle point. The neutral planes I kind of find is the most uninteresting for both the good and the evil. They're kind of dull. They're too much the peak of both the good and evil concept. There should be long-term emanations of the dangers imminent of the law planes trying to impose their order on the rest of the planes in the universe, whereas the chaos planes are just more kind of just fun places to be because there's just a lot of random little things you can intrude to do in there. And if you just rename the gods to whatever Greek god, it seems to better fit whatever the template is of the gods presented in Mythic Odysseys of Theros, and still include centaurs and satyrs as playable races. Maybe bring in elves because Aboria is also partially an elfin dimension. I feel like that's a much more kind of better thing to use Mythic Odysseys of Theros for, and allows you to freshen up a Planescape type campaign setting that jibes better with the greater D&D universe. Ravnica similarly, especially with its guilds, if the guilds were just the factions and you designed the Planescape factions basically on the model of Ravnica's guilds, up to and including some of the special gifts and all that kind of stuff, I guess that's just where D&D is now. Ravnica, if you were to just take its map and roll it up into a tube and fuse the ends, that's actually a pretty playable depiction of what Sigil could be like in terms of a city with all these kind of subdivided zones and weird different races, and it's all just kind of endless city, and occasionally you have these broken down parts. Just add in that you have this weird light that kind of orbits within the inside of the tube, and add the Lady of Pain, and boom, you got something that's maybe a bit easier to wrap your head around than some of the stuff that is in this book, In the Cage, the original depictions of Sigil. Part of the thing about Sigil's design of being, a city on the inner walls of the inside of a toroid. Basically, if you were to take an inner tube or a tire tube and build the city on the inside of the tube structure, that's what Sigil is. And I feel like the maps and such in this book, the inner walls need to be much shorter and smaller compared to the outer walls, and the way that their design doesn't really match up to that, and also doesn't match the curvature. It's unfortunately one of those things that's kind of next to impossible to really draw on paper properly if you actually map it out. I mean, it's even worse than trying to draw an accurate flat map of a global Earth that doesn't end up distorting something here or there. You need some sort of this really advanced 3D model of the inside of Sigil's structure to really be able to visualize what's going on there properly. I feel like it needs to be much bigger than what this kind of indicates it to be. So in some ways, you can view the maps that you can find in this as kind of examples of the overall where roughly things are kind of located in relation to each other, but not an actual literal representation of what's there in the distances between. Because like I said, like the inner structure of the inner part of the tube would be like smaller and squatter than the relative part that matches it on the outer walls of the tube. So, and like, you know, like I said, if I do find if there's anything to be said about Ravnica, it seems like maybe a little bit more of a playable depiction of what that kind of structure would be if you look at Ravnica's maps and its layout. Kind of if you could merge the two together, you know, take Sigil's overall structure and keynote locations, and then just kind of morph a Ravnica style, you know, city with little tiny miniature provinces within it. Also, like if you were to bring in some stuff from Kalimport from Forgotten Realms, and the way that city's depicted with its like separating walls and competing, you know, districts and all that kind of stuff. Also feel it would be appropriate to kind of flesh Sigil out a bit more and make it more of a breathing city that has stuff going on within it. You know, a key to Planescape is to not be like judicious and super liberal with keys for people to find planar portals. Like the keys shouldn't always be obvious, and even at the places, the controlled gates, you still like, you know, might have to negotiate or pay for having the key. There might be various restrictions. Depending on the planes, there could be paperwork involved. You know, characters trying to get into a law plane are probably gonna have to sign someone's summons form. I personally like to kind of keep the Modrons around. It's less so much that the Modron march was completed, but it got stalled out when it hit limbo. And so maybe that's kind of part of the problem. And in my own game, I just restored the Outlands. I'm fine with the Outlands. They're actually really better for your starting location. Just pick one of the various border towns around the ring that you like the vibe of, and just have like low-level adventures around there. Keep Sigil in the background as something the characters can look forward to getting to, but like they need money and power before they can even really appreciate the place. So unless you're going to be doing some sort of Thief of Baghdad kind of campaign in Sigil, like no, it's not a good place to start your characters off if you're doing Planescape. Otherwise, yeah, you know, you can use bring in some stuff from Mythic Odysseys to do a campaign that kicks off in the upper levels of Oboria. Maybe do some stuff with Ysgard if you want something a bit more Viking flavored, albeit like the whole thing of the universe is a bunch of gigantic floating Earthbergs. There's a lot of weirdness, you know, like these are all intentionally kind of mind-bendy, Doctor Strange-esque kind of, you know, settings, and so like they're not for the faint of heart. And that's maybe in part why there might be some wisdom in the current 5th edition design of like the focus for the lower level characters is just to be on a normal planet, and then just like once you peak out at 10th level and have saved, you know, the whole land from the thing after, you know, finding this super awesome item, like maybe there is not much really left to do on that world except become a nuisance over time. And so maybe that is the point to transition people into some sort of greater story arc, which is more based on their own like character backstories and interests, and less so anything that you can really write ahead of time. But like, I mean, really the only things that don't fit otherwise into the Planescape universe that 5th edition has put out is purely the Magic the Gathering stuff. If Ravnica and Theros are as described, they do not fit into the greater like universe of how, like, you know, you have the material plane and kind of focused within there you have the ethereal plane and the inner planes, and then surrounding the material world like a shell is like this mixture of astral plane and Feywild and Shadowfell, and then above and beyond all that expanding outward you have, you know, the infinite realities of the outer planes of existential crises and afterlife and all that kind of shit. So all the D&D setting, Eberron, all of Faerun, Greyhawk, Krynn, even hypothetically Athos, if we'd ever get like some sort of modern adaptation of Athos. Is it the slavery or the psionics? You know, one of the things that kind of like, even if you want to run the AD&D version of Dark Sun, you can get, you know, the original Dark Sun box set in print on Drive-Thru RPG, and get the proper edition of AD&D in print. But if you're like me, and like, yeah, the PDFs are great and all, but you don't actually want to use it at your table if you don't have the book. You, like, last I looked, you still can't get the Psionics Handbook, and I'm curious as to like, what is it, the mind control and hypnosis? It's been so long since I've seen a copy of it, I don't entirely remember all what was in it, but you know, hypnosis is also one of those things that's now on the verboten list, so in a subtle way. So is it the psychic stuff? Like, what is it about Dark Sun specifically that's so heinous? It's a Brahm painting brought to life. It's like, you know, no, it's not supposed to be for little kids. It's harsh conditions and depicts a harsh reality. Like, we're not even allowed to address like the horrors of our past and our fantasy fiction. Like, you know, we're not allowed to talk about any of the bad stuff in real life, and we're also not allowed to like even like espouse about it through a fictional lens. I mean, like, yeah, what the fuck's going on, guys? Anyway, that's Planescape. Hope you liked it. Be sure to hit like and subscribe. If you did, leave comments below. I'm not sure if I like tied that up with a bow to any degree or not, but who cares? Life is life. Why are you still here? Get waspinated.